Hey everybody, and welcome to another stellar episode of the Everything Went Black podcast. Tonight's guest is Ryan Canavan, known for his record label, Hex Records, among other things. Ryan and I have been friends for, just about 20 years at this point. And it's a great opportunity for us to catch up, talk about the old days, talk about what's going on today, actually. Trying to run a record label in a digital world, tactile products in a virtual world. Before we get started, I just want to give the appropriate shout outs. If you are into fitness and healthy living, please check out Onnit's products. Go to the Everything Went Black Media website. Check out the banner for Onnit. You can order exercise equipment, or you can order supplements and foods, MCT oil, things like that. If you dig coffee, go to savagegoldcoffee.com, which is also available on Amazon. So if you live on the West Coast and you want to save on shipping, or if you live overseas and you want to save on shipping, go to Amazon, and both roasts are currently available. So check it out. On the Savage Gold front, I'm sort of in a cocoon right now, redoing a bunch of stuff. Going to have a pretty cool holiday roast for I consider Halloween my favorite holiday. So it's going to be a Halloween roast coming out. So that's something to look forward to. Also, for those of you who want to support the podcast, you can check out our Patreon. I'm getting started on offering some free stuff. One of the things I'm going to be doing is an audiobook of some of the early anodyne touring experiences that I went through. So if you are a member of the Patreon, you will be getting chapters for free way ahead of when it actually gets released. So I'm starting on recording these chapters. So you're going to be getting like an exclusive edit of that stuff. You know, the final version might not contain some of the material that's in these initial stages. So that's like a big undertaking, and the actual final product might not even be done until like the middle of the fall or something like that. But if you check out the Patreon, you'll be getting these early episodes, or I should say early chapters, free of charge. If you want to hit me up, Twitter at Mike Hill HQ, Instagram Mike_Hill_primate, or at Facebook Michael Hill. Give our Facebook page a like. Give us a couple of reviews on iTunes. Follow me on Instagram. And there you go. If you want to hit me up directly, it's mike.hill@everythingwentblackmedia.com. So the coolest thing about, I just realized that the Hex Records is still really active, man.
Yeah, quite active. Yeah, indeed.
I mean, because, in the age of a lot of record labels kind of, falling to the wayside, some labels and distributors over the years that, Very Distro, Level Plane, like a bunch of labels that in the late 90s and the early part of this new millennium we're in have been like a staple of the kind of DIY hardcore world are now just memories. So it's kind of cool that Hex Records is still representing, and out there putting out releases.
Steady, I certainly can't afford to do the amount of records that a label like Level Plane was able to somehow pull off. I mean, it seemed like they put out a lot of stuff in a year, and from my understanding, they're a label that didn't really have a whole lot of people, work in that label. It was essentially just Greg, and I can't even fathom how he could do that, to put out like 100 releases in the space of like 8 or 9 years or something like that, I mean, that's like the level of like a regular, professional record label with staff and stuff like that. That's the amount of records they put out. If I put out like 3 records a year, I feel like overwhelmed, but that's like my limit,
Yeah, that's definitely a solid release schedule for an independent label these days.
Yeah.
So you and I met, like you were actually one of the early supporters of some of the work that I've done over the years. And, whenever I think about, my other band, Anodyne, and even Tombs, I always think about how, like, Syracuse and, like, Ryan Hex were, was someone that was like I said, an early supporter and someone that I actually relied on for getting shows in upstate New York. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
when
I'm glad to have been able to help out. I feel as if maybe because of maybe helping you out, you met some really, really awesome other people who really, that you kept in touch with, especially like the Ed Gein guys and the engineer guys. That definitely formed quite a good relationship, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. Jesse helps me out. He's like, basically my roaster for the coffee company. And
Right.
yeah, Ed Gein, we toured with Ed Gein, Engineer, like all these
Yeah.
great bands, and they're all actually Ed Gein is still you just put out a record by them not too long ago.
Yeah, it was like Christmas. Yeah. They're very, very in the background, but they still like practice every week pretty much. And then they just go into hiding for like long periods of time. They all got grown up lives and stuff.
And the Engineer guys have a relatively new band. It's not really a new band, but a lot of people might not be aware of it.
Right, because they're another group that the three brothers run their store, and two of them have children, and so they don't play out much. But Blood Sun Circle is definitely like just such a wildly interesting band. Just like the cool stuff that they come up with, and as rare as it is, those guys are just like, I don't know. Those guys are inspirational just because they are always pushing themselves to take DIY into like one step forward. Like they were like, well, how do we go on tour? Well, they figured that out. And how do we record a record? Well, they figured out how to become pretty good recording engineers. And then they figured out how do I get a better sound out of my gear. So they decided to learn how to build guitar cabinets. So those guys are always just one step ahead, just like always figuring out the next thing. I find that really, really awesome.
Well, that's one of the things about Syracuse. Almost everyone I know up there has some other relatively successful venture going on. It's like, the brothers have the music store, the Gorham brothers, and Jesse's got the coffee place and the coffee shop, Recess Coffee.
Yep.
And I think Graham works there.
Yeah, Graham is like the head roaster. He's like the main guy. And then Jesse and this other fellow, Adam, who I'm sure you've met at one time or another, Adam, yeah. They're the owners. And it's crazy,
And Aaron has the printing company, right?
Yeah, he does a screen printing business, which is pretty successful too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So when I first met you, you had the magazine hanging like a Hex going on, and you also had Hex Records. And you also were pretty much like the go-to guy in Syracuse if you played non-tough guy style hardcore.
Most of the time, yeah.
Like you were the only. You pretty much were the only guy I knew of, because I never really played. Well, briefly, I guess I played in a tough guy band, but like.
Hey, I booked you in that too.
Actually, that's right. Yeah, that was one of the proto Hellfests.
That's right.
So I know we're going back into ancient history right now, but the idea of Hellfest and what Hellfest has turned into, it started out as like a very grassroots kind of like DIY, independent kind of thing, and then it turned into this other thing. And was there how involved were you in that?
Well, okay, so to definitely go into ancient history, there was this fellow, Justin, who for a while was doing a bunch of shows in Syracuse. This was around like late 1995, 1996, and I thought he had really interesting taste in music. Like, he wasn't just booking like the real popular hardcore bands of the day, or the more moshy style. Like, he was taking a chance on other stuff. He brought like a Veil up here. He had like Ink and Dagger play up here, like some very Kerosene 454, some Discord bands, and that really opened my eyes, because to that point, bands like that really weren't coming around here. So I thought it was really awesome that he did this. And in 1996, like, kind of, I don't know, later in the year or something like that, he had booked a 2-day fest in Syracuse, and I got really excited about it. And then it got kind of pulled out from under him, and the club canceled it on him, and it kind of, became nothing, and it was definitely disheartening. So the next year, in 1997, I started booking some shows along with Keith Allen, who you've probably met a million times, definitely. And played in like a bunch of bands. And he and I kind of started collaborating on doing some shows in Syracuse, and we thought, hey, that fest was going to be so great, and why don't we try doing that? Why don't we try booking this for Syracuse? And I mean, when I think about it now, we planned maybe like 3 months in advance, and something like that, like, nowadays would be like 6-7 months at least of planning, and we just threw it all together, and somehow it mostly worked, and we just called it the Syracuse Fest, and went off pretty good in 97. There was some crazy stuff that happened at it, but by and large, for two young dudes, just getting into booking shows, like, it went okay. And then the next year, we had a little better handle on how to do it, so we did it in 1998. And then in 1999, I was in the midst of finishing up college, so I wanted to focus on that, and I let that be known that I wouldn't really be helping out that year. I still helped out a little bit, but not too much. And 99, they decided to call it Hellfest, and I thought, okay, whatever, I have no say in this. I just put a minor hand in, and I think for like the next, year or two, I just helped out on a really, really minor level, especially like, Hellfest 2000 was some huge thing, and it was this crazy debacle, and a lot of insane stuff happened with venues switching and things happened like that, but it was still a lot of fun. And by that point, I was kind of, outside of it. I was just like an observer, I would go because it was in my town, and a lot of bands I liked played. So, and after that, I think Keith, especially, he wanted to be very serious about it, and he really put, a lot of time into it, and he had other people helping him, and especially like the guys from like Trustco Records were quite involved, because at the time Josh Grabell lived in Syracuse, and he helped out, and then a couple other local promoters who were pretty involved with booking shows, they helped out a lot too. So, after a certain point, there was nothing for me to contribute, honestly. And in a sense, I'm kind of glad I stepped back when I did, because it just became this enormous thing that just, I'm sure, would just stress me out and be, completely overwhelming. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, these days it's like a career move to be doing Hellfest. Then it moved down to Jersey, and then the Hellfest that goes on in Europe, does that have any ties to the U.S. version of it?
No, to my understanding. So the last year that Hellfest actually happened was in New Jersey, and I think a large part of that had to do with some of the people who were helping with it. They were based out of New Jersey, so they had access to different venues there that were a better deal than they could get up here. And then obviously, it stopped happening here. And to my knowledge, I guess the name Hellfest was like incorporated or something. So the people in France, wherever it happens now, I guess they bought the rights to the name.
Oh.
But it has nothing to do with any of the people who were originally involved with it. Have zero involvement. They basically just sold the name, and that's it, and it's completely out of their hands. So whoever, some people in France own it now, and it's something completely different, totally unrelated to what happened in Syracuse.
Yeah, Kiss plays it. It's like Kiss and like Alice Cooper headline Hellfest now.
Yeah, so kudos to them.
What a like a sort of manifestation of the American dream in a lot of ways, man. It's like, it's kind of weird. So it was like a weird story,
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it could be like studied in like a school of management class, I think. Where
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the guys who worked on Hellfest, they could probably give a class on, some things not to do, because I mean, not to say I'm completely, I'm not guilty of this, because obviously the 2 years that I worked on it, there was lots of mistakes, like just learn as you go. And I think the other guys that kept it going after I stepped away from it, they certainly made their fair share of very big mistakes, but they were just figuring out as they went along, and they certainly could teach a class on what not to do these days, hindsight is 2020 or whatever they say.
Yeah, it's like the other big fest that was happening around that time was Crazy Fest down in Louisville, and
yeah.
Another Ryan Patterson, I believe, was involved in that.
Yeah,
and that's
I never had the opportunity to go. I really wanted to, because that was another one that had always a great lineup, and they made an extra effort to like try to make it really fun, and really silly and a good time. And I know a lot of people who went, like a lot of people from up around here who went to it, and they really enjoyed it. And obviously, Ryan Patterson is like the guy. He's just an incredible person. Yeah, that's another one that just, I guess it kind of ran its course, and that was that.
We Anodyne, that is, played the last one that happened, and by that time, I mean, that had to have been like maybe 2004, 2003 or something like that, maybe.
Right.
2002. And by that point, it had pretty much grown really far away from what I initially had envisioned it being. I mean, I'd read about it. Initial Records had that zine, that they put out, and
yeah.
And you'd read about the Crazy Fest lineups and everything, and
it
looked like it all took place in like a VFW originally, with like bands like Coalesce would play, and whatever, and, Boy Sets Fire.
It was like down on like the riverfront in some like massive, stage, and so
yeah, it was like this full rock experience. Like when we played, it was the headliner was Andrew WK.
Yeah.
And then Hatebreed played, Mastodon. I mean, it was like a pretty, and it was Mastodon right at the point where they were starting to become, Mastodon. Like, people know of them now. So it's like, the big stage vibe and everything. And, I remember us and Playing Enemy played that, and we were on at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon or something,
I'm sure you guys went over fabulously, both bands, with that crowd. I'm sure it was just a bang up,
Oh no, it was like, it was pretty grim. But what tripped me out about that whole experience was like, it was an interesting time, because I feel like, especially like around like 2002, 2003, like hardcore had started to change, where back in the 90s you would see distros at shows, and like maybe a label would have like their records for sale. And a kid with like a like a distro of all this different stuff, zines, books, all that kind of shit. But
right.
At Crazy Fest, and it was like kind of like I remember it being this like really heavy experience when I saw that there was like Victory Records was there, and if you bought Victory products, they put it in a plastic Victory bag, and it was like going to a mall. It was like very much this commerce based. Very mainstream sort of vibe, even though a lot of the bands, like the Locust play, who they weren't, obviously not a commercial band in any sense of the term.
Right.
But there was like this move towards making like inroads into like the more mainstream world, which hardcore definitely moved in that direction in the subsequent years after Crazy Fest, I think. So it was like a real kind of like end of an era, beginning of a new era kind of time period, at least like when my experience with that.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I got the vibe from it that was kind of similar, like on a smaller scale, of like like what I would imagine like Warped Tour to kind of be like, you know, because I mean I haven't been to a Warped Tour in 20 years or whatever, but I get the impression it was something similar to that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've never been to a Warped Tour, but like now it's just like shit that I can't relate to is like, you know,
Right.
the sort of vibe at Warped Tour.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like I don't want to knock I want to knock some of those bands because they're dog shit, but I mean, I don't want to knock, you know, all of them. It's just that, like, man, I'm going to be 40 this year. I don't really relate to your teenage angst.
Well, Sick of It All
I went
played
through
this year.
I'm cool now, you know.
Yeah, Sick of It All played this year, and they're, you know, those guys are like, you know,
they're the best.
Yeah.
They're incredible. Yeah.
It's funny how many people actually that like different styles of music all agree that Sick of It All is a great band. You know what I mean?
They're kind of like the unifying band of hardcore. Like if you have, you know, any sort of disillusionment about like, oh, you know, I grew up in the punk and hardcore scene and all those guys were full of shit, and I learned later on, now I'm just bitter and depressed. It's like, well, then look to Sick of It All, because those dudes are like exactly the same. You know? Yeah. They're like the one unifying thing, you know, that everyone can agree on, that they are awesome, because they are. So.
And with only one lineup change, really. I mean, they only just Craig. Craig's like the quote unquote new guy.
He's like the young guy.
Yeah, even though he's been in the band for like 20-something years at this point. Yeah.
He's still the new guy.
Yeah. I just saw Craig today. Actually, it's interesting that it's funny that we're talking about Sick of It All right now. But yeah, that's how I knew they were on Warped Tour, because he's like just came back from, you know, being on the road, and he's like, oh yeah, I was at Warped Tour. I'm like, cool.
Yeah, I mean, we could you know, have an entire podcast dedicated to just talking about Sick of It All, and that would be fine with me. But you know, I imagine you'd want to talk about some other stuff.
I had Lou on like maybe a year ago.
Who was that?
Lou from Sick of It All.
Oh, Lou Kohler, right on.
Actually, the episode right before you was Roger from Agnostic Front.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to check that out. It's an interesting. He has a book out about, you know, the early AF years, which is a pretty interesting book. Yeah. Then again, it's like everyone seems to be putting out books from the New York hardcore scene, and you know, it's kind of the same ground is covered in a lot of them. And I mean, I don't know how many. I mean, it's surprisingly, I've never been a big New York hardcore fan myself, but you know, a lot of work-related stuff goes on where I end up having to talk to some of these guys and interview them, and end up reading some of the material that they've written. And the Harley Flanagan book, the first, you know, 150 pages, 200 pages of the book is like a really concise document of New York in the late 70s and early 80s. And as a historical sort of filter, I think that book is really, really good. I mean, later on it gets into all this other stuff, which, you know, is kind of controversial, and, you know, it's like this big hot button discussion that people have down here about, you know, Harley and John and all this other stuff, which is not something I'm really interested in. But
yeah, sure.
Yeah, but the first section of the book is like really cool. You know, if you're interested in finding out about, you know, New York City, and, you know, he talks about, you know, these like very obscure like punk bands that were making their rounds in New York in the early days, and the different clubs and, you know, types of neighborhoods and things.
Yeah, that, like, you know, that piece of New York history I always find really fascinating, especially how it kind of crosses paths with some of the early New York hip hop. I just find that stuff absolutely like mind blowing and fascinating, because that's such like a spark, you know. Like, I mean, I was like, you know, 5 or 6 years old at the time that it was going on, so I didn't know about it then. But just that time period, like for music, and how, like, you know, like underground culture was just like really coming up, you know, with like punk on one side and hip hop on the other, and some of them being like, you know, of the same mind, kind of. I find that absolutely fascinating. I love that sort of stuff.
Yeah, New York is really unique that way, I think. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm a carpetbagger. Like, I didn't grow up here. I grew up, like just above Westchester County. So I'm not, it's not like I was this life on the streets or rough and tumble youth that I might. I was a suburban guy, but
Right.
I always had an appreciation for New York City, and the fact that the diversity of the different types of people that live here. I mean, a lot of the punks and kids in the hardcore back in the old days, we're different culturally than say Boston or Chicago or DC. There was a lot of black people and Latino people that were involved in the scene, and culturally, it crossed paths with like the hip hop culture and Latin music and all this other stuff, and that's kind of like really interesting to talk to a guy like Roger or Freddie about that, since both of those guys, were around during those years. And,
Yeah, they were there. They witnessed it. Definitely.
yeah, I really hope no one makes a movie about that time frame though.
Yeah, it could only. I don't know. It could be really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be very difficult to get it right because you got so many people with different accounts of how things happened, and you're likely not to get a completely accurate story.
Yeah, like when I was like 9 years old, 10 years old, I would go down to the city with my dad to go to like baseball games and stuff, and it was like, it was like Taxi Driver, you know what I mean? Like we would be on the subway, and my dad's like, "Don't touch anything, don't look at anyone, stay here." It's like, we went to the circus one year, you know what I mean? And it was like going to Madison Square Garden was like the most tripped out, intense thing I've ever experienced at that age. To be like this little kid walking around in that neighborhood at that particular time and just being like overloaded with all this stimulus. You know what I mean? Smells and sounds and all this crazy shit, man.
Yeah, I think I was in a similar position in a sense. I mean, obviously I grew up further away and in Syracuse, but when I was like 12, I think, was the first time my dad took me down to New York City, and thankfully he was very into like exposing me to culture and things. So we went to New York and he took me to museums and we saw like Keith Haring art. But this was like 1989 or something. So we go into Times Square and it's still like kind of a shithole.
Yeah.
There's like street vendors everywhere trying to sell you bootleg tapes and shit, and porn theaters everywhere. And I was just like, this is amazing. So I caught some wind of that too when I was a youngin, but obviously not on a frequent basis. Only a couple times before it really started gentrifying.
It's all gone now, man. I mean, now it's like, New York has the charm of like an airport these days. It's like even like where I live in Brooklyn. I live in a neighborhood called Greenpoint, and that juxtaposes Williamsburg. And I remember like when I lived in Boston, coming down to New York to go see Fetus and Unsane play at Coney Island High, and I was like, we crossed the Williamsburg Bridge accidentally, and we drove through part of Williamsburg, and it was like warfare, total.
Yeah.
And now that same neighborhood, I walked through it just the other day. I was down there, and it literally felt like I was like in an airport. It was like it looks just like it has the same character as like being in like a nice airport. Not even like LaGuardia or JFK, but in like a really cool airport like in Houston or something. It's like
it's very safe. It's very I mean, New York's just it's so much more safe than it used to be, and which that's a good thing. People don't want to be victims of crime or whatever. You don't want your car. I had my car stolen in New York City once. I know how.
What's the story with that? How'd that happen?
Oh man, I mean, okay, it got stolen in like the most like placid fucking neighborhood too. I went down. When was this? It was I'm trying to think of the year. I want to say it was like 2002. I think, and I went down there on my own, and I stayed with a friend who was going to Fordham University. So he was like living in Midtown Manhattan, more or less. And I parked on the street, and apparently I was in a parking area that I thought was fine. I wasn't going to get towed or anything. So I'm staying at his dorm, and then the next morning I can't find my car, and I'm thinking, oh shit, I got towed. I call up, police, and their procedure was to canvass the neighborhood, in case like I was just some stupid idiot tourist who got lost and can't find his car. So turns out, and then we didn't see it. Turns out like they called up the impound lot. They didn't have it, so they're like, yeah, it looks like your car was stolen.
Oh man.
And then I got it back like 2 months later or something like that, or 3 months later. I got some letter from the city saying they found it in front of a fire hydrant, and the battery was stolen out of it. So someone joyrided it and stole everything I had in my trunk, which was nothing more than like some tools and the battery missing. And they wanted to fine me for all the parking tickets that I accrued in front of the fire hydrant, which I fought that and won, and I got my car back. And it was really strange, But even in 2002, I'm saying like New York was particularly safe. Like it was a generally safe place to be. It gentrified quite a bit by that point, and then it just got even more gentrified after that. And I kind of have a love-hate thing with New York now. Like I want to go down there because I have friends who live there. I have great places to eat. There's always some good shows going on, but just the hassle of being in New York is it kind of wears on me. So
they got some balls trying to charge you money. You know what I mean? That blows my mind, man. Like they're
like, here's a bill for your parking tickets. I was like, it was stolen at the time. So I was able to get I had to get a police report, stating that it was stolen at the time, and use that. And I should have framed the letter, like, hey, I beat New York City,
Wow, man, you gotta pay here. You gotta pay. It's like every you gotta be on your toes in this fucking town, man. It's like, if you don't, every turn there's somebody looking to put their hand in your pocket for something,
No doubt.
It's crazy.
No doubt.
It's like I have the van, down here. It's not,
right.
We don't tour in it anymore, obviously, but I still own a van for various things, But the, it's like Greenpoint used to be very easy to park in. There used to be, not a lot of people here, and it was kind of this like hidden corner of Brooklyn that no one went to really. But now it's all, people are moving here. I have to. It's become like it's part of my consciousness of when I have to get up and move the van, or I have to think 2 steps ahead. If I go somewhere tonight after a certain hour, I have to be careful in the morning because I have to move the van to a meter and then move it again. It's like such a I burn up so much mental resources thinking about parking.
Right, yeah, and I got these friends, I got a friend who lives in like the heart of Williamsburg, and I guess he's been there for quite a long time, so like, he's just accustomed. He's had his apartment for a long time, and he's like, I get a great deal on this place, like $1,200 a month, and it's a fucking railroad apartment, man. It's a fucking hallway. Yeah. And it's like, oh, and you get to live like, around, like just off of Bedford Ave, like, I don't see how that's a deal.
No, man. No.
It's ridiculous to me, and a lot of people will make the argument that oh, but New York's got everything. There's everything's happening here. But but you don't have the money to do any of it because it costs so goddamn much to live down there.
Yep.
So it's okay to visit, but man, you couldn't force me at gunpoint to reside there. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a scam, definitely. It's like, people buy, it's like the legend, selling the Brooklyn Bridge. I got a bridge for you, I can sell you too,
Right.
But it's funny, talking about the gentrification, though. It's like, I'm not one of those guys who's like waxing nostalgically about getting, the days when you can get stabbed walking down the street, and oh yeah, it was better in the 90s when I was in danger all the time, and like there were hookers everywhere and drugs. But it's like, the problem with gentrification, and I think this is probably a national problem, is that it's not like an individual is improving his neighborhood. It's like a company comes in, a corporation comes in, and buys up this area, and they change it without actually enriching the existing area that's there. You know what I mean? They'll just like knock a building down, put in another building, and your landlord now, if you're gonna move into that building, lives in like Illinois or something. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
that's really what's, I think, killing the whole vibe here, is just there's no character and everything is removed. There's no direct line to the people owning these properties or any of that kind of stuff, you know?
Sure. I mean, like romanticizing the old days of, well, I almost got stabbed down on, St. Mark's Place or whatever. Like, yeah, it makes for a good story, but, I mean, I'm happier being able to walk down the street and not get stabbed. However, I think your argument is completely salient, about, yeah, like it's not enriching the neighborhood. It's someone coming in and pushing poor people out.
Yeah, totally.
It just pushes them somewhere else. It doesn't solve the issue. It just pushes people somewhere else, like further out on the fringes, So, yeah. Sure. Yeah.
And the new people that move in are just here, for short term. Like that's like, where I live. I'm not trying to paint this picture like I'm some, long. I mean, I've been living here for quite a while, but like I'm not like a old school guy who's my family's been here for 20, 30 years or whatever.
Right.
But I have been living in this neighborhood for a while, and the new people, I talk about this too much actually, but like I'm going to talk about it again this time around.
Go for it.
But the people that move in the last couple of years, I've been having a lot of problems with them. You know what I mean? They're just like they don't really have any respect for the neighborhood or their neighbors or anything, and it's like oddly enough, the people that have been living here family wise for, a long time, yeah, they pick up garbage after themselves. They kind of cut the noise like around 10, and
yeah.
the new jacks that moved in, they rage until all hours in the night during the week, and there's like garbage everywhere and dog shit everywhere, and it's just like a real drag because they know that in 2 years they're going to move away.
Right. And you're not the only person I know in New York who has that complaint. I talked to several people who live in that general area, whether it's Greenpoint or Williamsburg or Bushwick or those neighborhoods, and they all say the same exact thing. I bore witness to it. I think the last time I was in New York, which was in like the springtime or something like that, late springtime, and I came down to the city to see a show, and I arranged to stay with a friend. The same friend who lives in Williamsburg, and he said, I'm away, I'm out of town right now, but I'll leave the key for you, and you can just I'll have you meet up with my friend. He'll give you the key, and then you go in. So I had to wait right on like Bedford Ave until like 1 a.m. or something like that for this friend of ours to show up with the key because he worked late, and I just watched. There's just like roving bands of just like douchey dudes. Throwing shit around.
Yeah.
I mean, it looked like my neighborhood, in the peak of the school year. Like, I live in a university neighborhood, and it's like Syracuse University is like a party school, and the beginning of the semester on a Saturday night is like, it's like fucking Sodom and Gomorrah. It's just trashy kids everywhere. So, I've grown to ignore it at this point, but I was like, Jesus, this looks like home except for like taller buildings.
Yeah.
So, yeah, same vibe. So I hear you.
Yeah, it's a real drag.
Of course we do. We sound like old men get off my lawn type shit, but
yeah, that's true. The funny thing about it too is like I kind of feel like in some weird karmic way that this is like payback for all the years that I was when I was in my 20s living in Boston when I was like, shooting Roman candles at people and like.
Right. Yeah. And I guess the moment I do start thinking like, man, it's like 2 a.m. Shut the fuck up outside. And I'm thinking, man, when I was like 19 at 2 a.m, I was probably, like doing donuts on someone's lawn or some bullshit, So I try not to, I try to hold back and not be a dick because I'm like, I was a total fucking dick when I was 22. So,
But you know what, man?
He's back.
I look out my window and I try to check these people out, and see what they're up to, and like they're not 22 years old though. That's the sad part. These dudes are like going through like a second childhood at 35.
Gotcha.
So that's even like sadder in a lot of ways.
That is kind of sad. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was the Hanging Like a Hex magazine, which you did like for many years, and
Uh-huh.
it was always one of my favorite zines back in the day. And did you actually have any kind of journalistic training or anything like that before when you started doing that?
No, not really. I mean, I was a big fan of writing. Throughout like high school and stuff, I took many writing classes. Some were like advanced writing classes, and so I knew I was able to be a halfway decent writer of some kind, but I never was I wasn't involved with like the school paper or anything. It stemmed from me and my friends being really into comic books when we were younger, and we were all into art and drawing, and we actually tried making our own comic books. So we learned how, just via trial and error kind of how that, like if you look at a magazine, it's not like page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. You think about the front page and the back page are one page, like page 1, 2, and 39 and 40, and then it layers in like that. So we learned how to do that stuff, and that's what led me to be like, when I was getting involved with punk music and stuff, to say like, hey, I could do a zine or something that can be my outlet, and I know how to do some of this stuff already. So I jumped at it from that angle, from comic books.
How many issues of Hanging Like a Hex came out?
Well, it had a different name at first, and then by the 5th issue, I changed the name, and so altogether, all in all, it was like 18 issues over I don't know, almost 10 years.
That's still a pretty dedicated output, really. I mean, if you think about what it took to do that back then, as opposed to now.
Yeah, for sure. And it was. I mean, I had someone get in touch with me recently saying that they really enjoyed the zine. They've always been looking for this one particular issue they couldn't find, and I happen to have an extra copy. So I was going through like my old files and my old back issues and stuff, and I found one. And I'm looking at some of that stuff. I'm like, man, there's a lot of mistakes in here, and some of this looks like shit. But so I mean, I guess in some ways, I'm proud of the output, and I'm happy with the creativity or whatever that came of it. But some of it, I'm like, oh, I don't want to look back at this. This looks awful. So there's that too.
Was this person, just out of curiosity, were they like a younger person or an old fuck like me and you?
No, I feel like maybe somewhere in the middle. Someone who's got a little bit of age on them, but they're not like our age or anything. I think they just, I don't know. I think they just had an admiration of like 90s hardcore zines or something like that. Maybe they caught the tail end of it or something. When I was still doing the zine, and then just wanted to go backwards from there. So they're few and far between, I imagine.
Yeah, man. I feel like kids are real in the digital age are really missing out on like the tactile like zine experience, because even major magazines are going under and everything's online now, and everything's a blog with like videos and all this other stuff.
Right. I think like a zine can be successful now. A print zine can be successful if you're not working in like the immediate. So like something that became a real struggle for me, especially at the tail end of when I was doing the zine, was that more zine type content was online, and it's like, I want to interview this band. So the next day you send them questions via email or something, and they respond back 2 days later, and then at the end of the week you have an interview online. Whereas like when you're doing a print zine, it's like you interview the guy, and then like 4 months later it comes out. So I had to think about that in terms of like, how am I going to interview people? I can't ask them like, oh, hey, how's the new record? Because by the time the zine comes out, that record's been out for 5 months, and everything's media. Everything's like, snap your fingers, you missed it. So I had to think of interview questions for people that were timeless And I think some of the best zines, some of my favorites that I still have, issues of, were those type of zines that asked those type of questions that were like, I can go back and read it 7 more times and it's still going to mean the same thing, because they're asking these people timeless questions, things that that aren't just in like the moment. They're like bigger type questions. So I had to think like, maybe I should start ask people about like family or something, like, because that's an interesting concept that you can just kind of go back and read over and over again, and not just ask them about hey, what members of your band are vegan? Like that doesn't you know what I mean, like that, like that's like a 1992 question. So it certainly became harder, and the content, if you want to do successful like now, I think your content has to be like timeless, or maybe more like art based, and not so much like, hey, we're gonna like talk to this band and talk about their record. Like that's been done. It's been done like 5 billion times. You gotta come at it with a different angle or a different way. So I think that's how you do a zine now and make it relevant.
No, that's a good point. Because like some of the, I actually miss reading zines. I mean, after a while, just the cost of doing physical media, drove the price like high,
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I mean, as it stands, I subscribe to 2 non-music zines right now. I mean, I subscribe to Rue Morgue magazine, the horror zine, and Horror Hounds, like 2 horror mags. But yeah, like back in the day, especially, like in the 90s, it was like I would read, I'd read Hex. I was a big fan of that magazine, and Great God Pan. You ever check that out?
No, I never heard that one.
It's not even really about music. It's like it's about like Southern California culture.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there'd be like all kinds of like weird stories about the Black Dahlia and Charles Manson and Richard Ramirez and stuff like that.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And then Your Flesh, which was like during that period of time catered pretty hard to that AMREP touch and go, like noise rock kind of thing,
Yeah, I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah. Like a couple months ago, I actually thumbed through some of those magazines, and it's real trippy because you thumb through them, and then like you see ads for records, that came out like 20 years ago. And it's like, fuck, man, I remember this shit. I remember Allied recordings, like.
Oh yeah.
The Allied comps that came out were fucking amazing, man. I found out about so many bands that way.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I've been going through this thing just recently of paring down some of my like 7-inch records. I got like hundreds and hundreds of 7-inches. So I was going through like pretty much all of them, and it kind of involves like, all right, unless I got this like last week, like I haven't listened to this in a year or 5 years or whatever. So I'm going, I think like, well, why am I hanging on to it? Like I should listen to it, and if I still think it's relevant, I still like it, then I'm going to keep it. And if I don't, then I'll sell it. So I've been going through like hundreds of 7-inches, like sitting around listening to a lot of stuff, and I think of some of those like comps, where back then I was like, oh, this comp has got like 5 or 6 bands on it, and I can learn about these 5 or 6 bands because there's one on there that I really like, and then 2 or 3 that I heard were good, and then a few that I don't know about. And I listen to most of them now. I'm like, man, these comps fucking suck.
Yeah, totally.
They're bad. There's like a couple that are still awesome, like what was the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly comp?
Yeah.
It was like a 3 7-inch.
Yep, I had that. Yeah.
There's so many good bands on that. It still holds up. It looks awesome, and but then there's other ones where like, that came on some European label, and it's like, oh, well, like, Inhumanity's on here, that might be cool. And you listen to it, and it's like, oh, this was so like they're like garage demo, and then there's like 2 European bands on here that just blow. And so with age, things, you kind of sort out the wheat from the chaff, or whatever the phrase is.
Man, that Good, the Bad, and the Ugly comp is pretty crucial, really.
For real, yeah.
It had La Gratona was on that. Craw, I think, wasn't Craw on that?
There was a Craw song on there. There's like Discordance Axis is on there. Yeah. Slug, and who else? I want to say maybe Devoid of Faith, maybe not.
There was some band on there that was like, it's like you had to really look in an obscure way to see how it fit on that comp, you know. But it made sense. I want to say Starkweather. No, maybe.
No, they're not on it. No. But yeah, I agree. Well, like Floor and Cavity are on there.
That's it. Yeah,
like back to back with Discordance Axis and Lagratona. Like, okay, like this all works. I'm down with this. This is like a lot of crucial, insane, heavy, crazy music. You know, Apartment 213 on there. Like, yeah, there's some pretty wild shit on that comp. It stands up. Stands the test of time.
Oh, okay, here we go. I just brought it up. So we got, let's see. We got Lagratona, a band called Fork. Mm-hmm. We got Craw. We got the Boston-based band Slug Hog.
Right.
We've got Cavity, Floor, 16.
Yeah.
Yep, and this band Toad Liquor, that's the only song I've heard of by them on there. It was just
that might have been the only thing they ever put out. Who knows?
Yeah. Thug, not the band from Boston, but a different Thug. And then there's this is it right here, dude. It's like Ice 9, Discordance Axis, Apartment 213, Devoid of Faith, Spaz, Damned, Enemy Soil, and the grind era of Suppression.
Yeah, that's just like...
You can't go wrong.
Holy shit, right? Yeah, like that's just like win-win, like all the way through.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with that.
And they're not like bullshit tracks either. They're not just like leftovers. They're like pretty solid tracks overall, you know?
Yeah.
I remember the Floor song being fucking awesome. So, yeah, that's a very, very good comment. And apparently not that hard to come by. Like, you can, you know, it's not like worth a ton of money or anything. Like, you can go on Discogs and find it for like $10 or something.
That's for anyone out there who is a fan of that style of music or any of those bands. That's 10 well-spent dollars if you can find this thing and throw down. And
for sure. Yeah.
You'll get hours of entertainment.
2 thumbs up. Yeah.
And it's a cool-looking package, too. You know, it's like...
Oh, yeah, like all silkscreen and stuff, and it had this weird package, a package design, which I ended up using a form of that for a couple releases I put out. So, yeah, the whole boxy kind of package with like 3 records stuffed inside. Awesome.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about digitizing the back issues of Hex, or, you know, any kind of online version of it anywhere?
Yeah, I gave it thought for like a few seconds, and then I thought, man, what a pain in the ass it would be just to digitize all this shit for like, you know, because I'd have one issue that'd be like 86 pages, you know, like, nah, I'm gonna spend all week like scanning this or whatever. So, you know, I mean, if anyone is out there who actually has those issues and wants to do it, I don't care. Go ahead. I think I've seen some minor digitization of some of the content of some of those zines, like here and there, like where some band just, like an interview that was done with them, they just scanned the page or something and put it up somewhere. So, I mean, if anyone does it, I don't care. Like, go for it, you know?
So you're advocating piracy, I see.
I'm totally advocating go for it, like with those zines. I mean, I'm not gonna do it. Someone else may as well. You know, I mean, if they really, really feel like digging through old content, that's fine with me.
So did you start Hex Records right around the same time you started doing the zine, or did one predate the other?
It was a few years later, actually. The zine started in like 1995, and the label was not until 1999. So it was kind of I don't know. It was something I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to do it. So like through the zine, as the zine kind of became bigger and more well known, and more labels were sending me stuff, and I'd be in contact with labels on a pretty frequent basis. I picked up some ideas of how to like put out a record and how that process is done, but it was still kind of murky to me. And then a friend's band, they were on that old label Temperance.
Yeah.
If you remember Temperance Records, they had done something through Temperance, and they had a couple extra songs or something. And they said, hey, the guy from Temperance, he wants to put out like a 7-inch comp or something, kind of like a sampler type of thing, but on 7-inch, and he wants to do it as like an insert, like for your zine. I was like, oh, that's an interesting notion. I was like, but this might be my foot in the door to kind of figure out how to do this stuff. So I got back to them. I was like, hey, how about I do it as a co-release, and we figure out how to do this. And we gathered some bands. There was supposed to be like exclusively Temperance bands, but it only ended up being the one band I was already friends with. And then I was living in Buffalo at the time, so the guys in Every Time I Die had just gotten started. Like they just started doing stuff, and they wanted to put stuff out. And I said, yeah, give me a song, and they gave me a song that actually was never released on anything else, so that's cool. And then a couple Syracuse bands that I was friends with, and the guy from Temperance dropped out. He just fell off the map. I have no idea what happened. And I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to do this on my own. I just, I think I just needed someone to like push me to be like, go and do this, and so at that point I figured it out. I talked to like that band Nora ended up being on the comp, and I talked to Carl Severson here and there, and he owns or owned Ferret Records, which became Good Fight Records, and I asked him, I was like, hey man, where do you press records? Like, what's your contact, and how do you do this? And he gave me some insight, and then I just ended up doing it. I mean, in 1999, it was, as long as you had the money, I think it was a relatively easy process. And so I put the record out on my own, and I just did it as an insert in one of my issues, and then it went from there. Then I kind of had the confidence to be like, okay, I guess I can put out records now. So I did.
So back in '99, there was still, like Mortem and all these different distributors were around, and
right.
So, was it how difficult was it to get your records distributed? I mean, of course, after the 7-inch that you put out.
Well, it was interesting because at the time, I was doing it as an insert in my magazine, and I had distribution through Tower Records, if that is to be believed, if anyone remembers that. So, I mean, I was fine. I got rid of a few hundred, no problem. After that, I was kind of on my own, like when I actually started putting out other stuff that wasn't part and parcel with my zine. It was like a separate thing. And I was kind of on my own, just kind of figuring out, like, how do I do this? Like, who do I distro through? And there was a few, like, distros that kind of picked up on some things here and there, but mostly it was the bands themselves and just going to shows, just going to lots of shows and, like, bringing them around with me and, being like, here, buy this, So, and then eventually Lumberjack got into the picture, and I ended up getting distribution for my label through them, which was, in retrospect, like one of the poorest decisions I ever made, but at the time it looked good. So
yeah, I mean, Lumberjack was ruling. It was like Lumberjack and Mortem, and and to some extent Ebullition for like a very specific type of thing, I guess.
Yeah, and Revelation always had like a big thing going too, but they were a little, at the time anyway, I think they were a little more insular. Like they only kind of distributed like a little bit of stuff, and now they're like quite big. They distribute a whole bunch of different stuff. But yeah, Lumberjack was like, that was like the peak at that time. That was like the best you could do, for a punk rocker. Like, yeah. And then they quickly went downhill, like violently downhill. So.
I remember that very, very, sort of, graphically, because I was, at the time that happened, I was working at Newbury Comics, like at the warehouse in Boston.
Right.
And there was like some merger or something, right? With like Lumberjack and Mortem.
They bought Mortem.
Yeah, they bought Mortem. That's what.
With the idea that like, oh great, we're gonna get all these awesome labels and we're gonna make tons of money, and like all the labels jump ship. They're like, fuck no, we're not going with this guy. So they bought Mortem and essentially bought nothing. Yeah.
See, I think, and that's like similar to what I said earlier. That was about Crazy Fest. That was kind of like, the end of. I mean, I don't want to get all like romantic about this stuff, but it's like,
right.
But it's like kind of the end of a different sort of mindset, I guess, that, was replaced in like hardcore and like punk music, I guess, in general. this sort of like corporate takeover of like a different distributor, and then like getting non-biodegradable Victory Records plastic bags to like carry your stuff in. It was like, to me, it was like the beginning of like this kind of the idea of getting further and further away of like what like the DIY essence of like hardcore music was all about,
Sure. Yeah, but I mean, you also gotta consider that, like, you can't stop, like a digital age, you can't stop, like, the current flow of information, how it happens now, and it's a completely different landscape, so, I don't know, as much as people want to romanticize, like, a DIY kind of ethic or something, it's like, well, if I'm booking a show, I'm still gonna like make a Facebook event for it because that's how people find out about shit. Like I'm gonna make flyers because I enjoy making them, and I'm gonna post them up around town and put them in places. But I'm also gonna like, do the online thing too. And I don't feel that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that's the way that people find out about things now, and. There's, for better or for worse, like, you can make an argument either way. There's some things that are great about it, and there's some things that totally fucking blow about it, like, everything is very oversaturated, so, it distills, it waters things down a lot, and it gets a little harder to find the good stuff, and you have to wade through a whole bunch of, bullshit to get to, like, the good stuff, and, but if you're older, then you know what it's like to hunt for a good band. I mean, now you just have to do it through a computer and going through a bunch of other bullshit before you get to the good stuff. And, whereas before, like when we were younger, if we wanted to find out about a good band, we had to like talk to certain people and then like find some weird record store out in the middle of who knows where, or like do some mail order and just hope the record shows up after concealing $5 in an envelope,
Oh, so, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's just a different form of like being on the hunt, of finding the good stuff. It's a different way of looking for it. That's all.
I remember ordering records from SST and like I would get them like 6 weeks later or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or never. Yeah. I mean, I would order stuff from like Varian. They'd always have like, put an alternates list in case we don't have it. And then I just gave my alternates. I'm like, man, I didn't order any of this shit. And I'm like out $20. Now I gotta like work my stupid grocery store job just to make money to get that record I did want, like, in another month. Yeah, so.
They gave you like a 25 to life record instead of something, like.
That did happen. I'm certain that did happen, Yeah, I mean, there's enough bootlegs out there of Rick to Life. I'm sure everyone has a 25 to life record somewhere. Anyone over the age of 30 probably has one that they didn't order.
Yeah, I've got a couple actually.
Right.
With Hex Records now, do you take advantage of all of the digital opportunities out there? For example, like can you buy Hex releases on iTunes and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's out there, and I mean partially because it's a little bit out of my control. I'll make no qualms about it. I'm not really terribly adept at getting things hosted on like iTunes or Spotify. Or I don't even use Spotify. I don't like it. I don't appreciate like the pitiful that they give to artists. But but I digress. I mean, that's beyond the point. I'm just not terribly good at that stuff. So I have a distributor, a very good distributor. They don't move like, a ton of my records. However, they guarantee will send me a check every single month, and they're nice, and they know what they've been doing. They've been doing this stuff for like 25 years. So, and they take some of my records, and they also manage like the digital side of things outside of Bandcamp. I completely control like Bandcamp stuff because I know how to use that, and I think they are a very like legit digital platform for music, because I think that's a way. They're like a platform that not only supports like good causes, but they when you buy something off of Bandcamp, like like almost all that's going to the artist or the label or whatever. Like it's a very direct. There's not many middlemen there. Whereas through my distributor, there's a lot of middlemen, and my stuff's out there on like every digital platform and all that, that you could imagine. But it doesn't mean that it's getting out to like millions of people. I'm sure a bunch of people use it, but not a ton. So,
what distributor is this?
They're called MVD, Music Video Distributors.
Cool.
They do most of their business as with like DVDs and stuff like that. They specialize in like horror DVDs and trash cinema and like music DVDs and stuff like that. But they also distribute some record labels and stuff too. And they do all the like when AMREP was recently doing some represses, they managed all that stuff. They handle all that. So they're pretty awesome guys. Like they're like old school dudes. They come from like an awesome background. They know what's up. But they get my stuff listed everywhere. I mean, you can go to like Target and like the Target website or something and find my records, strangely enough. I think it's just because MVD has inroads insofar as getting things listed like anywhere. Doesn't necessarily, it doesn't result in me selling tons of records, because who the fuck shops at Target and is going to want like a Bleak record? It's just not going to happen. But, I mean, they do their job. They're really nice guys. They've been around for a very long time, and they're very organized. So I stick with them. They're not going to like sell like a million records or anything like that, but they're very good at what they do on a small scale. So.
Well, that's good to know, man, because I often wonder if, for like a small label, like how you'd even get records out to people aside from just direct sales and mail order and stuff,
I mean, they're also like very easygoing when it comes to me selling. Like I trade with other labels, or I'll, sell to record stores on my own, like, independent record stores that if I'm in a different town, I'm going to stop in at the record store and see if they want some records or something. So I'm still all about that, and they don't care about stuff like that. And so I go through a number of different channels. They're like my main one, but I also deal with other distros and labels here and there.
Pretty cool. You mentioned Bleak. That's a pretty excellent band, by the way.
Yeah, those guys are fucking vicious.
Yeah, they're like they got a solid work ethic too. Or did they break up?
It's not so much that. It's kind of like their guitarist TJ, who wrote pretty much. He wrote almost everything. He was also an architect, and he has some very, very like serious health issues. He had to actually have a heart replacement.
Oh man.
Yeah, he had to have a heart transplant. He's like 32. So he's like, he really can't do much. He still kind of like writes music, and but he can't go on tour or nothing like that. That would just kill him. So so the band kind of had to step back and not really do much. And I guess I was just talking to one of those guys like the other day, and they were talking about how they felt bad that they weren't doing anything. I'm like, well, yeah, your guitarist, he can't get out much. I understand, but I don't think that the idea of their band is like completely put to bed. I think if at some point TJ's feeling up to it and said I wanted to play a show, then they would play a show. But yeah, in the time that they were very active, I mean, they were super active. They were on the road like constantly. Yeah. And and that was an admirable trait from them for sure.
My former drummer Andrew Hernandez also. I don't know if he recorded with them, but I know that he played live with them a bunch of times.
Andrew, I don't think Andrew recorded with them. However, Andrew toured with them a bunch. He went on like 3 tours at least with them, and their music kind of demanded like a dude who could really just crush it at drums. And obviously, Andrew just kills it. So he was good. And then they got this other guy named Mark who lives up in Canada to play drums, and that guy absolutely killed it. And then this dude Cam, who lives around here, he was their drummer as well, and he's actually a good friend of Andrew's. and Cam just destroys it too. So like I mean, I can't believe they went through like musicians, like drummers like that who were all really, really good. But you know, they would tour so hard that it was hard to keep people in the band because of how much they toured. So at some point, I think maybe they'll do something, but you know, who knows when.
Well, it's good to know that the idea is still out there.
Sure.
Yeah, so there's actually a pretty cool like roster of active bands that you got. There's that band Grizzlord from Connecticut too.
Yeah. Their LP just came out. Like, I mean, I was assembling them this week. So and the orders are going out this week. So yeah, they just put out like an LP. They were kind of holding off for a bit because they were apparently supposed to do a record with the label that Chris Spencer from Unsane does, and I guess that arrangement sort of, I don't know, went on the back burner or whatever. I'm not sure exactly. I think they waited on it a long time, and then they kind of were like, whatever, we want to put something out, and I said I'll do it, and it's a hell of an LP. They're so weird. They're so weird, but they have like such an insanely like heavy, just beefy, ugly tone. It's really great. Yeah.
And then of course we have our friends, the former Engineer band and Blood. What the fuck's it, dude? I feel bad.
Blood Sun Circle.
Blood Sun Circle. Blood Sun Circle. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they just put out their second LP, but I didn't release it. Again, there was another case of these guys being like completely DIY and like learning how to do things. And, I put out their first LP, and when it came around time for them, or when they decided they wanted to do another record, they started asking me some questions about like, what's a good place to press? And I gave them a bunch of tips, and then they figured it out, and they pressed their second full length on their own. And it sounds awesome.
Yeah,
it's great.
I bet, man. I always like really enjoyed whatever those guys did, man. It always, even though Blood Sun Circle is way different than Engineer, it still has like the characteristic of those guys working together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's equally as intense as Engineer. Like, I always thought of Engineer as just being like this intense band. Like, it's like it just comes at you like, like a freight train. And I think Blood Sun Circle is equally as intense, just in a different way. Like, they take a little longer to do it. There's like way more tension in the music, and there's Bobby's, instead of just barking at you, he's like howling.
His voice is great.
It's like, man. And then you see them live, and they just, the wall of sound, bam, So, I'm always going to be a fan of whatever those guys decide to do. It's always an inspiration, for sure.
So now, how do people get at you online? Like, just the website, is there Facebook and all that sort of stuff? You want to run through all that?
You mean like, just to check out what I do, or like, are you talking about bands that are approaching me?
No, I mean, just like if there's anyone out there who wants to buy a Blood Sun Circle, their first album.
Yeah, people actually want to buy records from me. That happens from time to time. So I sell music through both like my website, through it's like Hex Records at Big Cartel, and then I use a Bandcamp page, which is Hex Records at Bandcamp, and you can buy records from either of those sites. And I've been making a point lately of people, like international people. It's so expensive to ship records internationally. So I've been directing people, if they want to buy any of my records and they're not from the U.S., to go through MVD, and it's just MVD shop, because for whatever reason, they're like a corporation, they're a larger business, and they're able to do like pretty inexpensive international shipping rates. So if someone from another country wants to buy a record from me, I'm like, hey, go through MVD, because I'm going to have to charge you $20 just to ship a $10 record. They will charge you like $8. So like I think they're a better deal. So I'm more than happy to send international traffic through them. Anyone else can go through Hex Records, Bandcamp, or Big Cartel.
Cool. Yeah, they might have like a container or something like that. They might actually be shipping European orders from Europe.
Could be. Yeah, I mean, it's totally possible. And I I don't pretend to understand the mechanics of it all, but they seem to be able to offer a decent deal. So yeah.
Right on, man.
Yeah.
Are you you have like Instagram or anything like that where people can like follow you or?
Yeah, I do like Hex Records on Instagram, but I mean, it's not exclusively like label content. Sometimes it's about shows I'm putting on, or if it's you know, bullshit. You know, just regular Instagram bullshit. Like, hey, look at this mountain. You know, like, 'cause I like to travel. You know, so and yeah. I mean, I use Twitter, but barely. You know, so I mean, I try to stay connected as well as possible without completely losing my life into some sort of digital rabbit hole. You know, I still try to maintain a semblance of being able to leave the house. So, yeah.
Hey man, did the Westcott? There used to be that place, the Westcott Community Center. Do they still do shows there, or is that thing?
Yeah, kind of. So the Westcott Community Center has been hosting shows since like 1995. And before that, it was closed for a while. It wasn't in operation. And I've seen flyers of shows that happened there in the 80s. Like, specifically, I saw flyers for Gang Green playing there and Scream. Dude. So I was like, wow, this place was active in the 80s. So anyway, it's been doing shows for a super long time. I did shows there for a super long time. Eventually, I joined the board of directors. So I'm not in charge there. I'm a board member. I hired our executive director, who actually runs the place as a day-to-day center for seniors and after-school programs and things like that. But I still occasionally book shows there. It's a little more difficult just because they have so much programming going on that's outside of the realm of punk rock. You know, they have classes and stuff like that. So there's not that many shows that happen there, but I actually have a show going on there this Saturday for my band, Dialysis, and Grizzlor, and a local band called Difficult, who are members of a million other bands from around here, and this other band, Bad Cops, who haven't played Syracuse in a long, long, long time. They're old Syracuse guys who haven't played a show in many years, and they're coming back. So I thought that would be the perfect venue to do it at because it's a place that we're all familiar with. So from time to time, there's shows there, not that often.
Probably some of my fondest memories of playing in Syracuse were at the Westcott. I always really liked playing shows there.
Yeah, Syracuse definitely has been fortunate over the years. I mean, people complain, but they don't get that, like, it's so much worse than other towns, that we've had a pretty steady spot to do shows, like small DIY type shows. Like, there's always been a venue for it. You know, there's always been a place, whether it's the Westcott Community Center, or whether it's like the Spark Art Gallery or the Badlands, or like, you know, a couple basements around town. There's always been, like, or Gorham Brothers, they host shows at their store. I mean, there's always been like a DIY spot to do shows, and I don't think people really appreciate that fact. But I mean, we've been like super fortunate. Like, most towns don't have that kind of thing. Like, they might have a spot for 6 months, and then for 2 years they got nothing. So, you know, we've been lucky in that regard, and that's always something that I've really liked about this town.
Right on, man. So it was great catching up with you, Ryan. And
absolutely.
Yeah, dude. So a lot of good shit going on.
Yeah. I keep active, man, and it seems like you do too. So that's always good news. Sometimes I think I'm getting way too old to do any shit like this, or play in a band or anything like that, and then I see people who are maybe like a couple years older than me, or maybe like 10 years older than me, and I see that they're doing it. I'm like, well, if they can still pull that shit off, then I can too. So I'll keep doing shit like that as long as I am physically and mentally able to, and I hope you do the same.
But I don't really have any other things that I do, so it's like...
You sling coffee and you play in an awesome band. I mean, you know, there's that, so, you know...
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, I pretty much have reduced my life down to like a few things that I do well, and I think I do well at least, so I just kind of keep it after those things, you know? That's how you do it. You find what you're good at and you just push at it until, like, you get better, or you die. Awesome. All right, man. Well, thanks for listening out there, and thank you, Ryan, for spending like an hour plus of your time with me tonight.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for getting in touch. It was a pleasure. Listed, like playing out right about this time, so that's why I kind of thought that. I feel as if someone told me that they saw you guys play recently, but I could be completely mistaken.
No, there's been a lot of weird stuff going on. I mean, we just got back from tour. Last in July, so I mean we were out on the road for. I mean, the first half of the year we've been just doing a lot of touring. We're going back out in October. And,
were you on the West Coast?
Yeah, it was all over, man, everywhere.
Then it was probably Hernandez.
Andrew.
Where I heard it, like I saw you play recently. So.
Yeah, okay, cool. Because there's been, we were supposed to be on tour right now at Today's the Day, in the States, and then that got canceled. But someone confirmed a European tour with Tombs and Today's the Day without actually checking in with us. So, I mean, there was this concept. I mean, we were actually asked to do this tour in Europe, and I was like, yeah, sounds good, but that was the last I heard of it. There was never an official offer or any kind of, notation about, guarantees or any terms or any kind of logistical stuff presented to us. And then about a couple weeks ago, I started seeing posts on Facebook and Instagram about Tombs and Today's Day playing all these dates overseas, and I was just like, oops. So it's kind of messy.
Right.
Our booking agent over there straightening it out, and I just feel bad because, like, if it's something I definitely would be interested in doing. I just, would rather. I can't really agree to something without knowing what all the terms are,
No, of course, that's totally normal, Yeah. Yeah. So yes, the things I heard about, you playing out were all legitimate and actually happened. So.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. No funny stuff.